We are pleased to hear from our host, Chancellor Rebecca Blank. Chancellor Blank.
Thank you, Regina, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. It is always a delight to have the Regents on campus, and particularly when we're hosting, and it's good to see all of you. I hope this afternoon to do three things. I want to talk about some of the good news on campus, like chancellors always do. I want to talk about a few of the challenges that we face, and I want to talk about some of the ways in which we hope in the years ahead to be reinvesting in the campus and to lay out some of our plans. So let me take you through that. You all know that UW-Madison is an absolutely great choice for students who are a world-class university here in the UW system. We have the largest freshman class ever that entered this previous fall, and we are at the point of record applications for a number of years now. We went onto the Common App this past year, and so we were expecting a jump in applications. I think we got a slightly larger jump than we were expecting. Applications overall are up 8%. Now, yesterday was the last day to submit an application, so these numbers are hot off the presses. I just got them an hour ago from our student admissions office. Overall, they're 8%. We're up 3% in the state of Wisconsin and 10% outside the state of Wisconsin. Now, let me talk a minute about those Wisconsin applications. As you know, the demographics are going the other way. Anyone who's going to stay in Wisconsin to school almost surely filled out the UW app, not the Common App. So we are hopeful, and we're going to do the analysis on this, that some of that increase in applications came from students who were largely applying out of state who may not have applied to us because it was a hassle in the past, but it's quite easy now that we're all on the Common App. I'm hopeful that the movement to the Common App has done in part exactly what we wanted, increase the number of applications from what are often those very high-scoring students who are at greatest risk of leaving the state of Wisconsin. You'll be hearing more about that as time goes on. One thing we are doing here, the Common App, one thing we're doing particularly to reach out to the really star high school students is a new program called our Prime Campaign, which targets high-scoring Wisconsin high school students. We're rolling this out to seniors this year. Next year will include juniors. It's very important, I think, to hit them at a younger age before they're actually at the point of application. This program includes some high-touch recruiting, specialty study abroad programs, and full funding for everyone who qualifies for Pell Grants. We're holding some special activities on campus just for this group of students. And again, the hope is that this is a group that we can keep in the state who might otherwise go out. And we're always going to lose some of these students, but we want to do a better effort at really reaching out hard to this group. Of course, it's not enough just to get students to campus. To live up to our reputation, we have to offer not just first-rate classroom experiences, which I think we do, but we also have to offer some first-rate out-of-the-classroom experiences. So overall, they have a full, what we call, Wisconsin experience when they come to UW-Madison. In study abroad, we are the top 10 in the nation. Close to 30% of our students now go abroad. We need to keep pushing that up. Public service, we have a record number of students working with 90 community partners. New this year is a partnership with the Career Kickstart program to connect students with volunteer activities that are aligned with their specific career interests. Internships, 2/3 of our students experience an internship at UW, and 70% of those are in the state of Wisconsin. And our new Career Exploration Center celebrated its grand opening earlier this week. It's aimed at even better serving our undergraduates, and I'm pleased to say that Money Magazine just this month has named our career services program one of the top 5 in the nation among the public schools. So, good things happening. What are the educational outcomes from all of this? There are some key issues that everyone usually looks at, and there's some schools that are better than us, but we are better than many, many of the other publics. And let me show you, you've seen these slides in previous years when I talked, and I just want to show you what's happened in the last year. We have an outstanding retention rate. This is the number of sophomores who return to campus after their freshman year. We're over 95%, and for the first time ever, our targeted minority students have actually passed our overall class, and we have completely closed that gap. We have consistently, for a number of years, had improving graduation rates. Now, this is a 6-year graduation rate, so if you want to correlate this with our retention rate, go back 6 years on this chart. And it's clear if we're able to move these students over the next 6 years through the university in the same way our retention rates are showing, we should be doing a good job of closing some of those opportunity gaps here as well, and we've worked hard on this one. Our undergraduates now complete their degrees in an average of 4.07 years. That's 4 years and 3 weeks. And of course, and that's really come down in the last 5 years. And the faster you get out of school, the less student debt, and there's some real evidence that getting out of school fast actually helps on the career front as well. Our students do a number of great things, and their success is not just measured in statistics, but in what they actually do. They are the future teachers, engineers, doctors, artists, nurses, and in the last 3 years, our very best students have won all sorts of awards. We've had 35 winners or finalists for the nation's most prestigious undergraduate awards, the Goldwater, Marshall, Rhodes, Truman, Udall, that set of really well-known national awards. This year, we have a Marshall Scholar, Deshaun McKinney, who also happens to be the president of the Wisconsin Union, a really major job for a student. We have 4 Goldwater Scholars, which is very unusual. It's rare for any school to get more than 2 in any one year. And I've got to talk about the SpaceX Hyperloop competition, because that just happened this past week. The UW-Madison team here is an undergraduate mechanical engineering student team. And the charge from Elon Musk was to create a pod that can be shot through pneumatic tubes and people can ride in for long distances. So you could travel from here to Milwaukee in a pod in a pneumatic tube rather than sitting in traffic out on Highway 94. The charge was to build such a pod and to make it work. We were one of the top 3 teams coming out of the semifinals, and this is not just a national competition, an international competition. Just last week was the final round. We were not the overall winner, but we were one of only 2 teams selected for an innovation award, saying that our solution for how that pod was going to work was one of the 2 most creative in the competition. So, I'm always proud when our students are doing things like that, and it's obviously a great experience for them and great exposure for UW-Madison. Now, one of the main reasons our students do well is because we have such a great group of faculty. Our faculty bring more than $1 billion into Wisconsin every year. In research funding, they create jobs, build relationships with industry that all helps keep the Wisconsin economy thriving. Last year, we had more than 70 winners of major national and international awards among our faculty. And to give you a flavor of this, I want you to meet just one of them, Tony Goldberg, who is the John D. MacArthur Chair and Professor of Epidemiology at the School of Veterinary Medicine. Some of you met Tony last night at the reception. In the spring of 2015, we started to hear about largemouth bass dying off in a lake up north. That's a big worry in Wisconsin, where sport fishing is a $2 billion a year industry. Dr. Goldberg, and he took the case on. He runs our virus hunting lab, where a team of scientists from across the university are on the front lines of the fight against different types of viruses. Tony and his team found in those fish in that lake a virus no one had ever seen before, and they're working hard to figure out how to fight it. Let's watch for a minute.
Unless you understand what's causing these diseases, how they're moving, and where they are and aren't, there's really not much you can do. But if you do understand those things, you can make concrete recommendations and concrete policies that really help keep our wildlife healthy. The only tool we have to do that is good science. One of the major concerns about wildlife disease is that some of them can get into people. We have those in Wisconsin, including some very concerning ones. For example, Lyme disease. Well, because of the efforts of people like myself and my colleagues in the departments of entomology and in the vet school and other departments on campus who have built these years of expertise, we just found out recently that we were successful competing for CDC funds to create a regional center of excellence in vector-borne disease right here in Wisconsin. We are going to be the center of research and training and outreach for vector-borne diseases for the entire upper Midwest. And that's huge. That means Wisconsin's going to have an edge in responding to these new vector-borne disease threats, designing new vaccines, designing new treatments, training people. That's going to get national and international attention. And people who are interested in these things are going to want to move to Wisconsin to get involved in that. And they spawn entrepreneurial ventures like startup companies, not only here in Madison, but really throughout the state. Some of the places where these wildlife diseases are hitting us the hardest are in some of the most economically depressed counties in Wisconsin. But the strength of that team depends on having a strong university that can support these multiple disciplines.
The virus hunting lab is funded with $8 million in grants from the federal government and private foundations. That's money we have to compete for, and we can't do it successfully without also demonstrating state support for UW. But research is only part of Professor Goldberg's job. He also teaches or co-teaches 4 classes, guest lectures in 3 more, and supervises the education of students who work in his lab. And I want to introduce you to Professor Tony Goldberg. Tony, stand up. People can see you. Tony's just one of 2,000 faculty across campus who do wonderful things. I can keep talking about the good news at UW-Madison for a long time, but if I did that, I wouldn't be presenting an entirely accurate picture of our university today. So I'm going to do something that most chancellors don't do in these presentations. I'm going to talk about some of the things that worry me and that have to turn around if we're going to retain our top ranking. Now, let me begin by saying I'm very encouraged by the things that I'm hearing from the governor and the legislators in terms of reinvesting in the whole University of Wisconsin system, and I'm hopeful that we can all work together to change some of these worrisome trends. But I do think we're at a crucial point for the university, and I want to try and tell you why. So let me show you 3 slides that will tell you why I'm worried and why the need for reinvestment is so critical. First of all, research expenditures. As many of you know, we dropped from number 4 to number 6 in the nation in terms of research expenditures. That may not seem like a lot, but it is the first time since 1972, when they first collected data, that we have not been one of the top 5 universities in the nation in research expenditures. And this chart shows you why we are dropping. The red lines show total growth in research expenditures in Madison. The blue lines show federal dollars. The first 2 are Madison. The next 2 are all institutions. The last are top 25 ranked universities. We've been growing at about 2% over the last 10 years, whereas other top 25 universities have been growing at 4%. We're all growing, but they've been growing faster than us, and it's not a surprise that we fell from number 2 to number 4 and now number 6 in the rankings. This is something we've got to turn around. I think there are 2 reasons for this decline. First, when other schools recruit our faculty, they recruit the very top faculty. And our very top scientists and engineers often bring millions of dollars of this type of money into the university. While we've been successful at retaining many faculty, we have lost a number of really great people. And because of tight budgets, either we don't replace them, or if we do replace them, we hire a junior faculty member who is often years away from being at the same type of grant getting that the senior person who left was. So we've lost faculty who are literally bringing in millions of dollars and spending it in this state to hire lab assistants, buy equipment, bring people to Madison. Secondly, however, we haven't invested in new research areas as much as our competitors. If you look at some of the other universities around us, they've been hiring in some really exciting high areas where we think there's enormous scientific interest, where there's new federal funds. We haven't done a cluster hire of that sort for 14 years at UW-Madison. And in similar ways, our investment in some other areas of research has slowed down as well, and it's reflected in the lagging expenditures, right? So this is concern number 1. Concern number 2, lagging growth in revenues. This shows you the growth in a number of our peer institutions, right? And it's over the last 10 years. I've got Madison is the blue, the red line over to the left. The average of our peers is that light blue line. We have, over the last 10 years in our revenues, been growing about 2.6%. Our peers have been growing 4.2%. That's a 60% higher growth rate over those 10 years. Some of you run companies. If your company is growing that much slower than your competitors, you know you're in trouble, right? You are not keeping up. And if you look at the cumulative effect of bringing in revenue at a significantly slower rate than your competitors, it doesn't take many years to open up a gap that is almost unclosable. These other schools have had money to invest that we simply haven't had. They've given raises to their faculty and staff. They've hired more top researchers in growing areas, They've expanded their student services and educational innovation efforts, and they've invested in new research areas. Because our revenues have been shrinking, we aren't investing as much as our competitors, and that means we're falling behind. It's a slow decline. Places like UW-Madison don't change quickly, but it is a relative decline. The third slide talks more about this revenue slowdown, and the pattern is particularly acute since 2013. Over the first period here, we were actually growing at 3.8%. We were pretty much keeping up with our competition. But over the last 4 years, we faced a double whammy, both substantial declines in state dollars combined with the freeze on tuition. And those together, despite everything else we've done, have reduced our revenues at 2% a year, at a time when our competition was growing 4% or higher, right? That is a competitive problem. Our U.S. News rankings. Now, we can all complain about U.S. News rankings. I can be first among that. But there's something that everyone looks at. They reflect that. 10 years ago, from 2002 to 2007, our average ranking in U.S. News was 33rd. 10 years later, from 2012 to 2017, our average ranking was 43. Let me be clear why that happened. U.S. News looks at, I think, 7 to 9 different components, right? We actually improved on some of those components. Our graduation and retention rates improved, and the share of our alumni that give back to the university went up. So we should have done better, except there were 2 components that we did markedly worse on. Faculty compensation dropped from 74 in 2008 to 118 this year, and dollars per student dropped from 47 in 2008 to 63. You can't be a top 10 university when your faculty compensation is 118 and your dollars per student is ranked 63. And it is the financial problems the university has been facing that has dropped our, in fact, despite those, we've shown gains in some other areas for U.S. News, but they've been swamped by these financial problems. So let me be clear as I talk about the problems we're facing. UW isn't doing badly. We've maintained excellent outcomes in many areas, as I've shown you. But higher education among top-ranked universities is extremely competitive today. And if we're not keeping up with other schools who are moving forward even faster, we're falling behind. To maintain excellence, we have to catch up in revenue growth and increase our reinvestment back into the university. Now, one thing that many people tell us is that we should cut our way out of this problem by reducing our administrative expenses. And again, you've seen some of these slides. This chart shows a number of our Big Ten competitors and shows the percentage of their budget that goes to central administrative expenses. On average, excluding us, they're spending about 6.2% of their revenues on central administrative expenses. We spend 3.5%, markedly less than most of the rest of the Big Ten. That doesn't say there aren't more things we can do to save money and be more efficient. We're working hard on that. But you're not going to get a lot more money out of cuts in central administrative services. And indeed, there's some services where we probably need to be growing. In general, you can't increase investment by cutting. And let me give you an example. A number of people have said to me, well, what you should do is cut those areas where you have low demand and shrinking numbers of students and use that money to invest in the high demand areas. They're absolutely right. And we have cut substantially in certain departments where the numbers of students has shrunk. We have a number of departments that are smaller in terms of size and number of faculty than they were 10 years ago. But we couldn't move that money someplace else because those cuts all went into filling budget holes, right? So we had no money to move once we filled the budget hole. So while we did the cuts, it didn't give us any new investment funding. So my general theme here is it's time to reinvest in UW, and I'm not telling you stories that are any different from stories that the rest of my colleagues over here would tell you as well. We need these universities, and we particularly need UW-Madison to attract and grow business in the state. Modern business, whether we're talking about agriculture, manufacturing, healthcare services, or anything else, wants to be big near big research and educational institutions. If you look at any cluster of growth in the United States, you're going to find a big research university very close by, if not in the center of that cluster, and oftentimes you'll find multiple universities close by. So I would argue that UW-Madison is really central to the long-term economic health of the state. So if we want to reinvest, what are we doing to make this happen? And let me talk about a two-part strategy here. First of all, we have to work with the state to strengthen and build on our 169-year partnership as a major state university. But secondly, we have to be developing entrepreneurial strategies ourselves to grow revenue streams that are within our control. So let me talk about each of these in turn. I don't have to tell you a lot about our partnership with the state. You have been very involved this year with the budget request that I thank you for. And I want to underline the importance not just of the dollar request, which is important to us, but the capital budget, the compensation request, all of those things matter. So thank you for fighting for that, and we'll see where this goes. The governor has indicated that he's going to propose a tuition cut, but that he's going to fill that with new money. And that's very heartening. But of course, we need money beyond just filling the tuition cut if we really want to reinvest. I'm heartened by the governor's statements on this topic. I'm heartened by what I've heard from legislators, and I hope that the final budget provides the sort of additional investment money in the UW system that's in line with the relatively modest request that you all, as the Board of Regents, have made. But I'm not just here to say that we're asking the state for more funds to help reinvest. We need to do our part. We need to be entrepreneurial. I've shown you how we've kept our expenditures down, but it's also on us to grow revenues. So we have a 5-part strategy that we have been pursuing at Madison to be entrepreneurial and to work on other revenue sources. I've shown you the slide in other years of how our different revenue sources are growing. The state is our smallest revenue source at this point, and we have to be focusing on some of the others. So let me talk about each of these 5 other revenue sources and what it is we're doing to try to grow those areas as well. First of all, expanding the summer semester. I think I talked about this last year. Our first full rollout for this was last summer, the summer of 2016. We offered 71 new courses, particularly big courses that lots of students have to take to fulfill their requirements. We had more than 1,100 new students enrolled, and our tuition revenues grew 21%. Our goal over the next 4 years is 10% growth in both enrollment and revenues through 2020. That's the sort of entrepreneurship that we should be doing on campus. Secondly, growing programs for professionals. As this slide indicates, we've made real progress on this as well, but there's more progress to be made. We've nearly doubled the number of courses that we have for non-traditional students, professional masters, licensing, capstone certificates. Many of these are off campus or they're hybrids between online and on-campus activities, and they bring in groups of often older students who are going back to get more skills and who would not normally enroll in our traditional long-term residential programs, either undergraduate or graduate. We offered, as they say, have doubled the number here and have substantially expanded the number of students. Let me give you an example. Our computer science capstone program was designed jointly with EPIC out in Verona. It's taught at EPIC in the evening, and it's open to both EPIC and non-EPIC students. There were 250 students enrolled in that capstone program in 2016, more than triple the size from when we started a few years ago. Third strategy, you know all about this one, set market-based tuition for our professional schools and our non-resident students. Regents have been a real partner here in allowing to charge tuition equivalent to what others charge their students for professional or out-of-state experiences. And this helps us provide the same quality of educational experience at UW as those other schools are providing. So thank you for your help in that. Strategy 4, grow alumni support. We're currently in the midst of a $3.2 billion alumni campaign, all ways forward. Some of you know about that. We're past the halfway mark already, thanks to extraordinary participation by 155,000 of our alumni donors. We've had substantial fundraising growth in gifts as a result of this campaign. In 2012, the year before I came, the year before we opened the campaign, we took in $290 million in new gifts that year. The last year for which is 3 years later, 2015, it's the last year for which we have the full year information, we took in almost 600 million, right? Huge growth. Now, let me be clear. When I talk about bringing in millions, much less billions of dollars, I'm not talking about spendable income here. Some of this comes in as bequests, and I hope we aren't going to see it for several decades. Some of it, most of it comes in as endowments, and that, it's paid out over time, and it's paid out at 4.5%. So this money results in long-term revenue for the university through an investment that in turn we can then call upon. My best example this year of one of our just great gifts was the $50 million in scholarship matching that Ab and Nancy Nicholas made. And as many of you know, Ab passed away this past summer. We celebrated the end of this match just last month on the basketball court, which was a place that Ab loved. This has brought in a total of $100 million in scholarships for undergraduates, athletes, and graduate students. It's $100 million in endowment, pays out at 4.5% when all those monies are collected, which means $4.5 million in new spendable financial aid dollars that make the University of Wisconsin at Madison more accessible and more affordable. So those are the ways in which gift funding can really make a difference to the institution. Finally, strategy number 5, growing research funds. And we have to work to turn that trend around in terms of what's happening with research at the university. And there's a whole bunch of things we're doing here. I'll mention just a few. We've started something called UW-2020, funded by WARF, which allows people in interdisciplinary teams to submit a proposal for something new that they want to work on that has the promise of substantial funding, but you have to do some front-end work to get there. And we funded 28 of these proposals in the hope of generating a number of new interdisciplinary projects on campus. We're talking about how we get better support for UW scientists so they have help competing for these big, complex interdisciplinary grants. It's hard for one faculty member to put these together. And we're talking about growing some of the big interdisciplinary centers that, again, can really bring in substantial research money and do some really exciting science with all sorts of great implications for the region and the nation. One example of this we just celebrated the opening of yesterday. This is the Wisconsin Crop Innovation Center. We've just received this as a gift from Monsanto. It's a facility they had in Middleton that they were deassessing because they are putting all of their research centralized in the St. Louis area. So they're getting out of this. It gives us a facility that is unlike almost any other in the country that a research university has available, that has all sorts of climate controls and special equipment for genetic crop research, and allows us to work on healthier, more environmentally friendly plants, and to grow plants that might have possibilities not just for food, but for medicine and fuel as well. And these are the sorts of opportunities we need to be not just taking advantage of when someone comes to us and says, well, let's give you a gift, but proactively asking, what are the areas that we need to grab where we've got faculty, can do a little bit more hiring, and can really push forward our opportunities to be on the front lines of science here and bring in some of the research dollars that are necessary to move that science forward. So I am quite convinced that in partnership with the state, we can invest and reverse some of these worrisome trends. They're quite recent trends, and as a result, they are reversible. It's our job to be entrepreneurial and to build revenues in those areas that we can leverage. But we can't do it alone. For 169 years, we have been in partnership with the state, and we're doing everything we can to generate our own resources, and we need the state to join us in that effort. As I say, I'm very encouraged by what I'm hearing, and I look forward to the governor's budget next week. It is worth noting, however, and I want to underline this, as we generate more and more of our own revenues, as we are asked to be entrepreneurial, as we rightfully should be, we are different than other state agencies, and we have to have more management flexibility and more control over our operations that are going to allow us to do the sorts of things we need to be doing as an entrepreneurial, only partially, very partially, state-funded agency. So if you want me to be doing these things, the state has to be asked for some of the flexibilities that we have long been talking about. But what does all of this reinvestment mean? At the end of the day, money alone is not sufficient to create a great university, and I suspect all of us can name particularly liberal arts colleges that got huge gifts from one of their donors, and you go back 15 and 20 years later, and they don't look any different, right? If money is going to make a difference, the question is how do you use it, right? You have to have the programs and the vision and the leadership that knows how to spend that money effectively to move the institution forward. So let me end by talking about the 3 investment priorities that we have that I think are highly important for building UW-Madison and for spending reinvestment money as effectively as possible. First, we need to build faculty strength. We have to grow faculty in areas where there's expanding student demand, areas like engineering and nursing and computer sciences and business, where we're turning students away because we don't have enough faculty to serve the demand that is present. We have to be strategic about how we hire people and build some research clusters in areas where 1 or 2 more people will really consolidate our research strength. And we need competitive compensation. Our full professors, like everyone else sitting here, make substantially less than professors at other institutions. Let me compare us to the Big Ten. These aren't the people on the coast. This isn't Stanford and Harvard. At other Big Ten publics, average staff and faculty compensation over the past 6 years grew 2.5% per year. We grew 0.8%. We were 0 most of those years. We were 1 and 1 2 of those years. That can't continue. Even if we receive 2% raises, as the Regents have asked for, we're still falling behind if our competition has compensation growing at 2.5%. And we just got to figure out how to address that. So those are some of our areas of reinvestment on faculty. We need to reinvest in educational quality, and it's not that what we're doing is wrong or bad, but this is an area that's changing rapidly, and we've got to keep up with those changes. As I said with one of the earlier committees, our students are driving this as much as anything, because they come to classes learning in a different way than my faculty over the age of 40 learned. And we have to provide the sort of opportunities that will take advantage of those student skills and abilities. We need to expand some of the innovative educational technologies. We have to make sure that we're serving all of our students well, that we have an inclusive and a diverse campus. We've talked about that in the past. I know it's deeply important. And we need to create new opportunities for out-of-the-classroom experiences, pushing beyond where we are now on internships and career services and study abroad in order to enhance career preparation. Finally, accessibility and affordability is important at any major public university, and no more so than in Wisconsin, where we have a substantial number of relatively low-income populations in both rural and urban areas of our state. So keeping financial aid as high as possible is important. Our efforts to raise institutional aid is important here. We hope we can partner with the state in this. It's important to keep student debt affordable. As I told you last year, only 50% of our students graduate with debt. And those who do graduate basically pay it back. They default at a very, very low rate compared to the national average. And that suggests their debt load is appropriate, and the jobs that they get are allowing them to repay it at a reasonable rate. But we've got to make sure we stay there. And we have to pursue creative strategies to expand access. And I will end by talking about one here. We have just finished updating our transfer agreements with all of the two-year schools and with some of the larger technical colleges, such as Madison College nearby. For many students, starting at a nearby two-year school is necessary due to financial constraints, for reasons as to why they need to stay close to home and can't come to Madison for a full four-year residential experience. Our transfer agreements make it very clear what you have to do if you go to one of those two-year schools in order to get automatic admission into Madison at the point you graduate from those 2 years. And these transfer agreements, I think, are, having these now consistently across the entire system in a way that lays this all out as clearly as possible are important. But they may not be enough to help everybody make a leap. We know that first-generation students often need additional support. They don't have the family advising about college that people whose parents went to school. And first generation here means students neither of whose parents have a four-year college degree, okay? They don't have the family advising. Their families are often not high income. They're more likely to start at a two-year school, to live at home, and they're more likely to drop out. And this is a substantial part of the Wisconsin population that needs more skills, and we want to provide them an opportunity to come to UW-Madison. These are the students who the state has to most care about. So I'm announcing, and this got leaked yesterday, as you all know, some of you read this, what we're calling the Badger First Generation Transfer Promise, right? I want to bring a world-class education into reach for more first-generation Wisconsin students. So if we have any new investment dollars from the state, we will prioritize this program, and I will pledge to spend that money guaranteeing that any first-generation student who completes the transfer requirements will receive financial aid to fully cover tuition for 1 year at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And if that student is also Pell eligible, we will cover all tuition for 2 years at UW-Madison. Now, I've heard, given this got leaked this morning, a number of news outlets are saying, well, that's just to give away to millionaire students. Let me be clear. We actually asked our financial aid office to look at this, and we've got this data for the 2015 year. All first-generation transfer students who were at UW-Madison at that point in time had unmet need, and they were 3 times more likely to be Pell eligible. This is a low-income population for whom this type of a promise can really make a difference for their opportunity. This promise will give any first-generation student in the state the path to a low-cost and a world-class education at one of the best public universities in the country, and I would even say in the world. This is the sort of thing that we can do when our revenues are growing at the same rate as our colleagues, when we can reinvest, when we can work in partnership with the state, both entrepreneurially on our own and with assistance from the state, to grow the quality of this institution. And I very much hope that we will have that opportunity. So let me stop there, and thank you for letting me the time to talk, and open up to any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Blank. I'm sure the Regents have questions or comments, but I'm going to start it off. First of all, I was very pleased to hear, we've all been concerned about the movement from 4th to 6th, and actually the movement from 2nd to 4th to 4th to 6th. So I was very pleased to hear your strategies, and not only in partnership with the state, but also independently. So thank you for that information. Also, I would like you to give a little bit more of an explanation of something for us, because I think it's important not only for the Regents to clearly understand it, but for anybody who's listening into this to clearly understand it. Last night we had a real opportunity to listen to interdisciplinary research, the importance of interdisciplinary research. Last night it was in the area of vector-borne diseases. You talked and referenced cluster hires. That's sort of a term of art, and you explained it just a bit. But I wish you'd elaborate a little bit more on what constitutes a cluster hire and why that's such an important component of what we're doing in interdisciplinary research.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a term used around a lot of universities, and it operates a little differently in different places. I can tell you what it meant at our university when we last did this, is that we put a call out for departments, schools, colleges, groups of faculty to put in proposals in areas that involved of substantial scientific interest, where we had a number of faculty, but we're missing one or two key areas, right? And they should put in the proposal explaining what we had on campus, who we needed additionally, and how we could build an even stronger and richer environment in this particular area by somewhere between 2, 3, maybe at the most 4 hires, right? Spread across different departments. And basically made a commitment to fund a substantial part of those new hires in the different departments. And we've done a number of these cluster hires in the past that are often very effective ways to move new and exciting research areas forward. So I'm going to give an example, not because we're going to do this, but it's one that people have talked about. Brain science is an area where the federal government has announced a lot of new money. We have certain areas of real strength in brain science at UW-Madison, but there are some areas where we're lacking some people that are quite key to that whole area of research. So you could imagine that group putting together a proposal saying there's 2 or 3 areas we really need to hire someone in, and if we do that, we will really be set to go out for some of these bigger interdisciplinary proposals around brain science research. Now again, I use that as an example. I'm not making any announcements about that, but it gives you a concrete example of how we might use this thing called cluster hires.
Thank you very much. All right, let's open it up. Regent Peterson.
Thank you, Regent President Milner. Great presentation as usual. Becky, thank you so much. We had a great series of conversations this morning in the Education Committee regarding admissions. This is, I believe, the largest incoming freshman class, and we had a big focus on, a year ago, what kind of in-state tuition or in-state admittance policy we would have, and we shifted from 3,500 to 3,600. That's what we now have. I believe it's the largest incoming freshman class for in-state students, or the easiest pathway to that, which was important to us. And you've been very aggressive on marketing to our best and brightest. One of the things that we also heard this morning was that the Wisconsin high school graduation rate is declining. And there was some discussion about the challenges that that will place with a fixed number going forward. One of the big impacts that was talked about was the impact that it will have on our fellow campuses. That if Madison is required to admit at 3,600 or more, that has impacts on the other 4-year campuses, and it very well may. As I think about the new first generation transfer agreement, I'm trying to figure out what would the impacts of that have. You know, as I visited my 2-year campus Regent liaison schools, I often hear about, for instance, UW-Marathon County is the biggest transfer provider to UW-Stevens Point. So, again, this is new to me. This is the first I've seen it, and I think many of us are in the same boat. How should I think about that in reconciliation with the other discussion from this morning?
So let me say 2 things, okay? First of all, as I've been looking at and working with that 3,600 number, and it's, you know, it's a strong commitment to the state. It's one that I believe, you know, there's no problems making that. But that is a commitment for freshmen coming in the fall. And I actually am not sure that is the right thing that you all should be looking at. You should be looking at how many students am I admitting at any point over the year and from any source. So there might be a value to coming back and looking at that number in a different way. So that's just comment 1. In terms of the effect, lots and lots of students from 2-year schools have reasons why they need to stay at home, right? So I'm not sure this is going to result in large increases in the number of transfer students that are coming to Madison. We hope on the margin it will have some impact. We've actually, as this morning's paper indicated, had some decline in the number of first-generation students transferring into Madison in recent years, and we're concerned about that because we really think we should be a place where the very top students coming out of 2-year schools should be looking at and making a decision whether they want to come or not. So this is an effort to make ourselves look, you know, like the place that if you really have the skills and the ability to come to UW-Madison, you've gone through the 2-year program, you want to feel you can come and you can afford, and if, you know, you don't come to, you don't refuse, don't forget about applying to Madison at the end of that time because you think you can't make it happen, right? Like I say, almost all of our 2-year first-generation transfer students do have a financial need, and this eases that a little. Now, they're still going to have to pay for housing and other things. There's clearly going to be costs involved. We are not anticipating, like say, a big elasticity on that number, as an economist would say. I think we'll probably get some increase. We'll see what it is. On the other hand, it's very good, I think, for our really top students who go to 2-year schools and want to continue their education. It's an encouragement and motivation for a group of students who often don't have that encouragement coming to them from other places.
Other questions? Yes, Regent Greeby?
First of all, thank you. I thought that was just an excellent
Could you
presentation.
be closer to the microphone, please?
Thank you. I thought that was an excellent
Say that again, Mike.
presentation, and I appreciate it. Was that loud enough?
Yeah, you're good.
As a result, it
Yeah.
raised a number of questions. I'll be judicious and won't ask all of them. Just, I want to be certain, I heard this correctly. The average time to degree for undergraduates at Madison is now 4.07 years?
Yes. Now realize that 4 years is not graduating on time. 4 years is graduating the summer after. To actually graduate on time, that's like 3.8 years, okay? So we've still got a substantial number of students who are doing co-ops in engineering, who are doing double majors and staying for, they've done some study abroad and it's put them behind a semester. But it does mean the average student is leaving with, you know, within, what is it, 4 years and 3 weeks, which says essentially they do some summer courses and then they're done.
Well, I
Yeah.
would just
Yeah.
suggest that that's
Yeah.
really commendable. And
Yeah.
it's been a long time
Yeah.
since I was a student on this campus, but it was nowhere near that.
It was not anywhere near that 10 years ago, much less
Right.
5 years ago, and we've worked really hard to bring those numbers down.
2 other quick questions. How would you respond to the argument that in the beginning of your presentation, you're conflating revenue growth with performance? And aren't those different things?
Well, it's why I said that money alone is not what's going to create a great institution, right? You have to know how to spend it and spend it effectively. And it's why I didn't just talk about revenue. It's why I talked about at the end where we want to spend that revenue. Because you can't do the investments that we need to do without having money. But having money alone doesn't guarantee you make the right investments. So you've got to believe both the ability to generate new revenues and the vision for what we're going to do, and that's what's going to create excellence. And I'd say we've been doing that very effectively for 169 years. So you should have a little trust that we'll be able to do it if we get a little bit more investment funds to do it effectively in the next decade.
And there'll be some
Yeah.
way for
Yeah.
the public and our stakeholders and us to assess that that's happened.
Absolutely.
Last question. So on the transfer student tuition issue, I think I share Regent Peterson's concern, I might state it slightly differently, that if we have one institution that is providing free tuition to that cadre of transfer student, it potentially disadvantages other institutions.
Yeah.
Because people are rational actors,
Yeah.
and if something is free or something costs money, most people will go to the free.
And I should note that we have redone all of these transfer agreements, and one of the things we did in those transfer agreements is we upped the GPA requirement to make yourself automatically eligible for Madison admission. And I think it's a little bit higher than the GPA requirement that is written into the agreements for some of the other schools. So, you know, on the one hand, we are offering something that we think is important to get into Madison, but you have to be a student ready to come in. And for that reason alone, I think there are going to be a lot of people who are not going to be looking to transfer to Madison. Yeah.
Understood. And the
Yeah.
last question along those same lines.
Yeah.
How do you square your comment about the need for us to have competitive tuition rates, that we are not undercharging for what we're providing with free tuition for, albeit a small number of people, but a group of people?
So competitive tuition, I'm talking about professional schools and out-of-state students, right? For in-state students, we always have substantial subsidies. We're not in a market-based economy for in-state students. If it was, our tuition wouldn't be $10,500 a year, right? So the question really is what subsidies and for whom, right? And as I say, the reasons to particularly subsidize first-generation transfer students is who that population is, what they offer to the state, and what are the particular challenges they face. And, you know, my comment, I'll say it again, every one of those students, when we looked at them in 2015, had some degree of unfilled economic need from the funds that we could give them. Gives you a sign of both the level of need as well as, I think, you know, a population. You know, what you want to do is increase skills in the state, and taking people, neither of whose parents had a four-year college degree, and giving them the opportunity to get there is a really good way to enhance skills and sort of grow the economy here. Yeah. Yeah.
Regent Tyler.
Thank you. I'd like to touch on research a little bit. When we look at you know, our declines in earning research funds and others are growing at a faster rate, I guess the blunt question is, are we addressing what the researchers funding agencies are asking for? In other words, they give us X million of dollars to do this research, and they're looking for some sort of outcome. Is one of the reasons we're not getting our increasing share of dollars because we're not generating the outcomes that they're looking for, or am I off target?
No, I really don't think that is a concern. I mean, our faculty, I mean, a test of that is if you get one grant, you get the second and you get the third. And our faculty are very successful at multiple grant getting, right? That once you've been successful as a junior or an associate professor at getting that first big grant, almost all people go on and continue to be successful year after year. So it's a sign the funding agencies are seeing just what they want. I think the issue is, who have we lost on the faculty, and what has that meant, and who have we replaced them with, and to what extent are we providing the same support? Particularly, the big money increasingly is in these big interdisciplinary projects. They're hard to put together, and they need some degree of institutional support to grease the skids. And that's exactly what we're talking about. How do we provide that support? How do you do cluster hires is important. And many of our competitors have been doing that very effectively in the last 5 years, and we just sort of haven't felt we had the dollars, and it's one of our highest priorities is to try to, do a little bit more of greasing the skids and making the attractiveness of those really big grants look better for our faculty to apply for, and make our faculty look more competitive for them. Yeah.
Regent Klein.
Thank you, Regent President Milner. Chancellor Blank, wonderful presentation and I think very thoughtful. Two questions. One was, there was an article in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, I think it was in November, talking about the fact that University of Wisconsin-Madison has to pursue classified research and hasn't kept pace in in that world, and there's increasingly more federal research that is considered classified. So I wondered if you could comment on that. And then secondly, in terms of reinvestment, and I do think you've been very entrepreneurial, the question is, if the two things that move the rankings are the faculty compensation and the dollars per student, how do you turn that around, or how do you enhance our ranking quickly if those are the two metrics we're falling down on?
Well, dollars per student is simply total expenditures divided by number of students. So if you're growing your revenues faster, you're going to be, that number is going to be going up, right? Faculty compensation obviously takes a different type of investment. You've made a start on that with your 2-2 request to the state. I've clearly tried to put money into that by doing targeted merit increases and matching outside offers and that type of thing. But that's one we're just going to have to work on, and it's not going to be easy to turn it around fast. I hope we can turn it around over a 5 to 8 year window, right? Let me go back to the classified research, because I hear this frequently and I think it's a misunderstanding. So if you look at the top 5 schools now, 2 of them have very little in the way of defense funding for them. I mean, it's not necessary to have defense funding, much less classified research funding, to be a top 5 expenditure school. And when we were in the top 5, we didn't have all that much either. There are schools that have substantial in classified and defense research. Many of those schools have been doing that for literally decades, and in many cases, the Defense Department invested in them in the 60s and 70s and, built certain clusters of people there. The Defense Department isn't putting that type of money out very often anymore, so it's a little hard to get in the game at this point. It's very hard to take an area where you have very little strength and build it from scratch. If you're going to try to expand research, what you want to do is identify where you have some strength and where it's a matter of growing a little bit and pushing it out. That is by far the most efficient and effective way to grow your strength rather than try to start something new. And there are a number of areas of classified research we really just don't have strength in. It doesn't make sense. It would take enormous amount of resources to grow it. And, it's questionable how quickly we could get into the game. So I think what we need to be doing is growing areas where we already have strength. We do some classified research. We certainly do some Defense Department contracting. We're not one of the big money getters there, but neither are some of the other schools that are up there in the top 5.
Regent Farrell.
Thank you. Kind of following up on Regent Klein's question, my question deals with research. At the very time that we're trying to enhance the overall economy of our state, and the other 49 are trying to do the same thing, is there anything more that can be done, not only, and I'm talking to you, but there's people behind me I'm talking to also. Are there ways that we can enhance the university's image in the eye of the driven by the quarterly report public sector to realize that some of their applied science needs, their applied research needs, or even needs they don't or things they don't realize would enhance their effort could be put forth. My concern is that we don't have enough private research in our institutions from the state as a whole, not only so that our dollars are in better shape, but also that the state grows.
So, there's some big state companies that we have very strong partnerships. American Family is one of them. GE Healthcare, which is expanding in the state, we've had a very long and very lucrative and good, effective partnership with. We have strong partnerships with a number of the state partners. I agree with you that we need to be growing that, and that is another way to grow research funds outside of growing federal funds is growing partnership dollars. And we've been in the midst of a variety of activities on campus trying to streamline the ways in which we approve those sorts of private university partnerships, and I hope we've made that a little easier, and we have to continue to work on that. There's some specific areas where I think we have opportunities, and we're going to try to put some investment funds in those areas to jumpstart a little bit. But I will also say that we are a little bit disadvantaged in that while we have a number of Fortune 500 companies in this state, it's very small compared to, say, the Twin Cities, where if you're the Twin Cities, finding big Fortune 500 companies who put a lot of money into shared research is much easier than it is in Madison, Wisconsin. So we may never be at the same level that some of our peer schools are in that area, but can we grow more in that area? Absolutely, and we're looking at what we need to do to make that happen.
Other questions from the regents? Yes, Regent Mueller.
Thank you, and let me echo the thanks for your excellent presentation. I have 2 questions and a comment. The first question relates to your summer school initiative. In your slide, you only showed an increase in tuition revenue, but it seems to me you would have an increase in cost as well. It seems to me this would help students graduate more quickly, but not really affect positively your bottom line. Can you comment on that?
Well, actually, one of the real reasons to push summer school before you push anything else is that it's a very low marginal cost activity. We have a number of classrooms and buildings that are essentially empty and unused in the summer. You know, we have a number of, particularly instructors, our faculty often do research in the summer, but our non-faculty teachers are often looking for additional teaching opportunities. And then we have some faculty as well who find teaching in the summer very attractive. So, you know, yes, there's some, you know, handling the applications, running the program does, you know, and you've got to pay the teachers, does involve some cost, but, you know, the hope is that you're actually capturing more money back than you're putting out, and you're much more likely to do that in summer school because it's essentially what you're already doing, but doing it in the third semester, rather than, you know, it's more of a problem in that second strategy, going for some of the non-traditional programs, where one of our criteria for approving those non-traditional programs is people have to show not only will the revenues, you know, they have to be big enough and structured in a way that the revenues are, you know, at least equal to the cost, but we really like the departments that are running them to have a little bit of an extra there, that these things allow them to do some stuff they couldn't do if they weren't running some of those additional non-traditional programs. But summer schools actually you can make some margin on. That's one reason to expand that before you do anything else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My second question relates to your slide on reestablishing competitive compensation, which I certainly strongly agree with. But there's base level compensation, and that's the 2% and the 2% that this board has approved or is endorsing.
Yeah.
But there's also merit-based increases for the first time. And I know you've been able to provide those to some of your key staff.
Yes.
What is the source of that funding for you?
That funding is, you know, it has to be base funding because you have to be able to pay it out year after year, right? You can't use one-time funds for that. And, you know, we have seen some growth in revenues in our summer program and our 131 programs through some of the tuition increases. We also did $50 million in cuts over the last 2 years. And explicitly, we're taking some of those monies, either freed up by cuts or new revenues, and putting it into compensation because that is such a high need on our campus. And that's where the dollars are coming from. We can't afford to not do that because if we lose our faculty, we don't have a university, right?
So it's not as if you're cutting programs in any way to fund.
Well, we did $50 million in cuts with this last round of budget cuts from the state, and that did free up resources. Most of that went to fill the hole, but we've also been trying to generate new dollars on top of that.
Understood, thank
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And my comment relates to the question of efficiency. I have to say again, as I say every year, I am not a fan of the metric of institutional support. There's such a strong incentive here and in every other school to code positions into any category other than institutional support. And there are some other categories that are very used very often, academic support and student support. And so really to my colleagues, this is a comment, not a question. I think it would be so much more helpful if we could have position counts in meaningful categories showing trends over time as we analyze budgets.
And I don't disagree with that. I mean, anyone who gives you numbers on efficiency, they're all can be criticized in different ways. The one thing I would say you have to be careful of, which is very true on our campus in particular, is that when we get new research dollars, we hire people, right? And they're hired entirely on soft money. And you should not be looking at people we're hiring on soft money, counting against our efficiency. That's dollars in, dollars out, right? To do the project, you have to hire people. And, you know, folks will look at the number of new hires we did last year and say, well, terrible, you know, you're adding all these administrators. Well, most of them, the vast majority of them, are people who are hired into specific research projects that to complete the project, you need the people. Yeah.
All right. President Cross, I believe you had a question.
I'm going to warn you before, and this is a softball question.
Oh, good.
Given the climate now and the situation with respect to research, you mentioned brain science as being a likely area where increased investment might come from. At the federal level, what are you hearing, and I don't know if it compares to what I'm hearing, where there might be disinvestment in research and or increased investment in other areas? Any sense of that at this point? You
know, things are quite chaotic right now, and no one really knows anything. Anyone who tells you they know what's going to happen to research funding in any particular area over the next 5 years is blowing smoke. So I think the NSF is probably in the biggest trouble, particularly NSF social science dollars, and we are one of the most effective universities in bringing in NSF social science dollars because we've got such an effective group of people there, and I worry a lot about that. I suspect that NIH dollars are probably, I won't say aren't going to be constrained, but I think they will continue to have some strong support, particularly in the legislature, given the number of both Republicans and Democrats who strongly advocate for the need for the type of basic medical research that does. We'll see whether the new administration gives any priority to defense dollars or not. Research, it's just not clear how high research is on anyone's agenda right now until the full administration team is in place. It's just hard to judge.
Well, this has been a very important presentation. Thank you so much, Chancellor Blank. There are many reasons why